and welcome to the Brookdale Visiting Writers Series. My name is Suzanne Parker, and I'm the co-director of the Visiting Writers Series, and I'm here today talking with Clay Mcleod Chapman. Clay is a playwright, he is a performer, he's a novelist, and he is a short story writer. He has 2 books out recently. One is a collection of short stories called Rest Area, and the other one is a wonderful novel called Miss Corpus.
And I totally paid her to say that.
And he paid me to say that. He did not pay me to say that. That's not it, though. The bio keeps going on. He's also a playwright and has had numerous off-Broadway and off-Broadway plays. I count 6, am I right?
Yeah, there are a few.
More?
There are a few. I mean, it's...
Are we into double digits?
Well, off-Broadway, you know, every production I've done in my closet could be kind of considered
Basement productions count.
Off-Broadway.
And you're also the creator of the Pumpkin Pie Show, which is called a rigorous storytelling session. So I have to ask the question, what does that mean?
Well, I mean, you know, cavemen, you know, sitting around the campfire, they're telling stories. And I feel as if, you know, whether it's going to be modern dance, whether it's going to be poetry, whether it's going to be filmmaking, you're always telling a story of some sort. And I felt that it would be great to kind of go back to the basics, really kind of boil down the essence of, I mean, theater mainly, but that idea of kind of whittling everything down to its just kind of core essentials, which storytelling. I was always a fan of, you know, sitting around the campfire, kind of spinning that yarn, you know, coming...
Was there an actual campfire, truly?
There were a few campfires. I mean, I'm coming from
Were you a
down
Boy Scout?
south. No. I never got beyond, was it Cub Scouts? I, like, attended the first meeting.
I did brownies and quit. Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't for me, but I love writing about them. So, I mean, honestly, I feel as if coming from down south, I'm a Virginia boy, and oral tradition has kind of been one of those things that from when I was a little kid, just growing up, like everybody had a story to tell. And I think using that as kind of a building block for other kind of mediums, you know, whether it's filmmaking or, you know, painting a picture, like you're always telling some sort of story. And I'm not a big fan of the pomp and circumstance of Broadway theater, so the Pumpkin Pie Show was kind of an antidote to that. It's essentially theater for people who don't like theater. And we throw away the costumes, we throw away the elaborate sets. I mean, all it is basically is someone on stage telling these stories, and I'm the guy who writes them.
Great. I know that the New York Times just gave the show a wonderful review and said how marvelous it is.
Lordy, I mean, it was amazing.
Was that your first New York Times review?
A third, and
I did bad research. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, like honestly, it's the one that counts, right? It was, you know, I'm 31 years old. I feel like everything that's happened up to this point has been kind of a bit of a miracle, frankly. And having started this show, this kind of storytelling endeavor since I was in like high school, it was always the kind of grandiose hobby. It wasn't something that, it wasn't about making money. It wasn't about kind of making it to Broadway or Hollywood. It was just, you know, doing this event in these small theaters and bringing in people who shared kind of that common interest. And all of a sudden the New York Times comes and says, we want to give this our seal of approval.
Did you know they were coming? Did you know they were in the audience?
I did. And it was definitely, for the week leading up to that night, it was hard not to kind of like chew off my fingernails. But I mean, the hardest thing was really, frankly, the time from when they came to the time when the review actually posted at 12:03.
How long was that? It was that night?
Monday morning. You know, they came on like a Friday, and no, it was like it was Thursday. It was a Thursday.
Oh, they made you wait that long.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Sunday night, I couldn't go to bed, and it was just kind of like just waiting for this thing. And I have to anticipate the worst. I'm damage control all the way. So I'm like, it's gonna be bad. It's gonna be bad. It's gonna be bad. And then lo and behold, they gave this very kind of positive growing.
It was wonderful. Yes.
Yeah, and it's framed on the bathroom wall because the next one's going to be that much harder. And like, as I'm like, now that I got that one good, you know, oh, the next one's going to be, they're going to rip me to shreds. So build you up to tear you down.
No.
Right?
So the Pumpkin Pie Show, for people who don't know, is a series of stories. And how many people are in it?
It depends. I mean,
It
honestly,
does change and evolve over time, right?
there's definitely been a rotating roster. I mean, I'm writing these short stories, and they're all first person narratives. So, you know, Moby Dick, call me Ishmael. You know, you get an actor behind that, and you got a monologue. You got instant shake and bake theater. It would be a rather long monologue, but I mean, you can do it. So writing these short stories was really just an opportunity to take something that starts on the page. It exists in paper form. It's something that people can read to themselves.
Yeah.
But there's this like additional component to it. It's something that's totally extraneous from what people read to themselves, but they can experience the same material, the same content, but in this altogether like completely different form. And it's,
Well, you're talking about Rest Area, the
Yeah,
collection
yeah,
of short stories. And I did notice that, clearly, that with both your novel and this, it's in characters' voices, it's in first person. And I was wondering how the stories came about. Were they originally performance pieces in the Pumpkin Pie Show?
I mean, it's a chicken and egg kind of theory. I'd say, hands down, they start off as short stories. Like, to me, I need to justify my existence and say that I'm a fiction writer. Like, I write short stories. I love short stories. I have a love-hate relationship with theater, so I'm kind of picking.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, like I feel like I'm picking and choosing the things that I like about theater, and totally discarding the rest. But I mean, the great thing about a first-person narrative in fiction is that you feel, when you read it to yourself, you feel like you're kind of in the trenches. You feel like this narrator is talking to you, the reader, and that immediacy, that level of kind of connection between the writer and the reader, kind of using this character's voice. I mean, I feel like that's amazing. That's something that if I can feel like if my hand has been taken by this narrator, whether they're reliable or not, like, you know, I'm being led down this path. And that's just more exciting to me personally than that kind of third person removal, God's eye view of something that's happening that I can kind of like, it's like I'm looking into a fish tank or I'm watching television. Like, first person narrative just puts me right there.
Well, there's a great immediacy in that. There's a great immediacy in that. Your novel, Miss Corpus, as well, that has Phil and Will in the voice of these two characters, and then Miss Corpus herself doing that. I wondered, I mean, your stories, Rest Area, when I looked it up, actually, it was on Powell Books. It was actually cataloged under horror.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
I mean, like,
I was surprised.
Well, I'm gonna come clean and say that I'm a sucker for cheesy horror films. Like, half of the bread and butter at this point, or portion of the bread and butter, is just writing these schlocky, you know, scream movies, and which is great. I mean, I love that. Like, that's a part of my existence. But stuff like Rest Area and Miss Corpus is kind of taking this viewpoint of like domestic horror, finding kind of the horror in the everyday, the kitchen sink horror, rather than the you know, it's not about like monsters or vampires or psycho killers, but more that there's this kind of like everyday mundane level of terror that I think we all face, whether it's like going to a rest stop or going to that Cub Scout camp, you know, weekend away. Like, I do believe that there's something that you can kind of mine from the kind of boring domestic everyday life that everybody can kind of
The
connect
horror of
to.
doing dishes.
There is something very horrible
Forever.
about doing dishes, and I think it's just a matter of kind of like the perspective that you choose and the way in which you kind of look at it. So I'm totally frightened of doing the dishes.
Now, you said that, you know, you're Southern, that you're a storyteller, that this kind of has Virginia roots. Do you think of yourself as sort of a Southern Gothic writer?
Yeah, it's good company to keep. I mean, I feel like growing up, I mean, I still love Flannery O'Connor. Like that stuff's amazing. You know, Faulkner. I mean, like I think these writers are, they're my heroes. So, I mean, writing Southern Gothic, it's something that like I feel like I've lived in New York for 13 years now, and you know, you can take the boy out of the South, but you're not going to be able to take too much of the South out of the boy. But I think it's taken me probably that decade plus to think of stories outside of the South, or think outside of. Yeah, I mean, writing from kind of an urban perspective, or something that wasn't population 500 or below it didn't feel like it was coming from me, or that it was this kind of a real voice or sincere voice that I could kind of appropriate until it was something that became commonplace to me. I mean, you live in New York. I don't think I necessarily felt like I was a New Yorker until probably like, you know, a month ago.
Well, there is that Time Out magazine did that What Makes a New Yorker survey, and they surveyed New Yorkers and said, how long do you have to live in New York before you can call yourself a New Yorker?
I think it's like your kids can officially consider themselves to be a New Yorker.
You must count back 4 generations, something like that.
Yeah.
Actually, can you, just for people who haven't read Rest Area, which I would thoroughly recommend, it is a wonderful book. Could you just describe the book for us?
Oh, it's crazy. It's loopy. I mean, I think
that's why I'm asking you to describe it, so I don't have to.
So I'd take the bullet. That's okay. You know, it's a very dark book that kind of like strikes this balance between this kind of domestic horror thing that we've been talking about, but there are some stories that are a little more quirky. I mean, I believe it's kind of a fair balance between kind of funny stories to slightly more serious stories, but they're all rooted within this first-person perspective. It's, I mean, the history of the book itself is one thing, but like the stories themselves are, it's kind of that Poe, you know, let's call it domestic Poe, where it's like,
oh, I like that, domestic Poe.
Yeah, I don't think it's too far off base, where you've got, it's like people telling their side of a story, but then you kind of slowly come to realize, the further into the story you go, that these people are either unhinged, or there's kind of that emotional curdling point, or...
Oh, I think that works. I think that works. Well, I'm right now talking with the domestic Poe, let's say, but we do have to take a break. So please join us. We'll be right back, and I'm talking with Clay Mcleod Chapman, and this is the Brookdale Visiting Writers Series show.
My name is Luana Noemi Morales, and I live in Union Beach, New Jersey. I'm taking some classes in digital editing, and also I'm a media technician at Brookdale Community College. I actually think Brookdale is one of the best community colleges in the region, if not the country. It's really student-based learning, and I like the classes are small. It's more personal between the students and the teachers. I'm really impressed with the fact that, you know, everything is geared towards learning and geared towards the student. I love to learn. I'm like a sponge, and anything you put in front of me, I will read and I will learn inside out, and education is very important in my family, and it's very important to me. I'm Luana Noemi Morales, and you are watching Brookdale TV.
Does peace really have a chance within our lifetime? At Rotary, we believe it does. We've created programs at universities around the world dedicated solely to teaching peace to a new generation. There's a new symbol for peace. Rotary.
Hi, and welcome back to the Brookdale Visiting Writers Series. My name is Suzanne Parker, and I'm talking today with Clay Mcleod Chapman, who is the author of the two books. First one called Rest Area, which we were talking about before break, and Miss Corpus, which is a wonderful novel. Before break, you were saying something about Rest Area. I asked you to describe it. And I was wondering, it's okay, we've called it this crazy collection of stories, a little bit of kitchen sink horror in there. And where do you come up with your ideas?
The newspaper. I'll come clean and say probably at least half of it, at least 50%, if not like 2/3, 3/4, just come from the newspaper.
Wow.
Every day.
The National Enquirer or the Wall Street Journal?
No, let's go. Totally legit, totally, I haven't lived in Richmond, Virginia for a while now, but I still subscribe to the Richmond Times-Dispatch. I subscribe to the New York Times, but if you comb through any newspaper, I don't care if you live in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Winnipeg, Canada, there is a section of every newspaper, and it's either a column or a cluster of these really, really small, paragraph long, usually there's 3, 4, 5 of them all together. They're going to be the nation's briefs, the national briefs, the metro briefs, the world briefs. You look through those every day, I will bet you money right now on air that you will be guaranteed to find a new story idea. And it's just, favorite one to this day, 1999, Zephyr Hills, Florida. A 79-year-old woman who held on to a rabid fox for 12 hours until help arrived.
So that is real.
Has died. I'm not making it up.
Because you start with I heard about the clip, and I'm like, okay, is he making this one up?
No. Truth is totally going to be stranger than fiction, and I feel like the proof is in the pudding. You just have to look to the newspaper, and that's where I get the majority of my ideas. I can't make this stuff up. I'm not responsible for it. I just write it. I am not culpable for the content of.
Well, you took it to the special place it went to, though.
Oh, the special place is one way to put it. Bad place is another. But,
Now, about Miss Corpus, which is just a wonderful book. Could you kind of describe that to people who are listening?
Yeah.
That's an easier one, I think, to do.
Oh man, maybe. It's my first novel, and at this point, I feel like I made every mistake that a person writing a novel makes in it. So I feel like I have a very special relationship with Miss Corpus, not to deter anyone from reading it. But it's about a car accident, and it's about the lives of these two men who have never met each other, who one day, for very special, specific reasons, kind of get into their cars, drive in totally different directions, and have this chance encounter with one another, and that is kind of the genesis point for the book itself. They never have known each other, never met, but this kind of collision course with fate brings them together, and it's this accident and the lives of these two men leading up to that accident.
Was this inspired as well by something you read?
Probably, yeah. I would say yes, and it's kind of this strange composite of like 3 or 4 different kind of newspaper clippings that I held on to for years. And it wasn't until my publishing company said, you are contractually obligated to give us a novel now, so what's that novel going to be?
Oh, you had a 2-book deal?
Yeah. It was finally sitting down and being like, all right, novel time, and being like, what's it going to be? And, having kind of scored through the newspaper for years, I do that rainy day clipping where, like, if I find something in the newspaper that I really like, I'll keep it, clip it, save it. Rainy day comes, flip through, and be like, today's the day I write this story. And so I think I took like 4 or 5 different clippings and kind of like fused them together into Miss Corpus.
What was, as somebody who works in storytelling, which is kind of short stories, and then somebody who wrote a wonderful collection of short stories, what was the shift? How did it feel writing a novel?
First 10 pages felt awesome. Felt amazing. It wasn't until page 11 that I was like, wow, how do you write a novel?
I have to keep going.
Yeah, page 15, page 50. It was a really interesting kind of learning curve. For me, it was totally that thing of like, I got scared. I mean, I'll be honest. Like, I totally had I mean, I have read a gazillion novels. I love reading novels. It wasn't as if I had never not read a novel. I mean, like, I mean, novels are kind of in the vernacular, but it wasn't until I had to sit down and do it myself that all of a sudden I was like, this is nearly impossible. So I got scared, and I did that thing of, I think I wrote a 234-page novel, but I did it within the expanse of 500 pages. I mean, I just wrote. I mean,
Was it the same parallel narrative, or were there extra stories in there that you cut out?
My editor hated me. She, like, the day I turned in the manuscript, it was a 500-page manuscript. Half of it was upside down. Like, it was literally, I mean, like, I wanted to create this kind of like David Foster Wallace postmodern kind of meta book where, like, you know, the car accident where the two men kind of collide actually happens in the middle of the book, so you would have
and
to
then you have
flip.
to turn it over.
Yeah, so
that's like those 1950s pulps where you got two books in one,
Exactly.
or they tell the other story on the other side. I loved those.
I totally.
I would have loved that.
I would have too.
I would have bought it.
Yeah, my editor, she was like, "You can't expect us to publish this." I mean, I think I had like 34 main character, like the novel was kind of broken down into like everyone else telling the story of these two guys. So I mean, it was.
So it wasn't actually in, because the story is in, because again, I love how you describe the book, because there is an element to the book that you're not revealing, that you know each one is not alone necessarily in the car. If I say too much, just throw water at me. I don't want to ruin the surprise. And so originally it's told in the voice of Phil and Will. Originally it wasn't in their voices?
I mean, they had their say. I mean, they were telling their story, but you know, you would have the toll booth collector tell their story. You would have, I mean, it was absurd.
More fragmented.
I mean, it was just, I mean, like everybody they came into contact with on this highway, on this road trip, would tell their story of their encounter with these two characters, Will and Phil. And I mean, the whole idea was that it would create this intricate tapestry of the South, and that, like, I mean, even the book talks at some point. Like, I mean, it's I mean, it's bizarre, and I think that that version of the book, which is still collecting dust on my shelf, like it's out there, and I think that this version of the book is the kind of streamlined. It's still bizarre, still kind of all out there, but I think it's the version of the story that tells the story best. I just threw the kitchen sink in up front, figuring if I have to do this, if I have to write a novel, darn it, I'm going to write a novel the way I would want to. So, yeah, it was I mean, it was just a loopy kind of time. I mean, I know I didn't shave for this interview, but if you can imagine, like, the year in which I wrote this thing, like, I think I came out like some Rip Van Winkle kind of Grizzly Adams.
But you came up with the first draft in a year?
Yes. I didn't leave my apartment in that year. I didn't see the light of day for that year, but it was an intense year. I didn't make many friends that year, and that's just because I didn't leave.
Ever talk to anybody?
Yeah.
You mentioned that the book actually speaks. I mean, there's Miss Corpus. It's this framing device that opens and closes the book. And I was wondering, you know, could you just describe that first off? And then how that came into, if that was part of the kitchen sink.
Yeah, I mean, that was the kitchen sink plus the laundry detergent at that point. But I kind of cringe a little bit when I think of the framing device of the book now, because I mean, like, really, like, when I had to write this thing, I was like, how do you write a novel, and why would I write a novel? Like, I mean, having been such a fan of short stories, writing a novel was one of these things that, like, you know, if I had a novel in me, it would be that process of, like, trying to understand how does one go about approaching writing their novel, and like, I mean, I don't want to get too kind of off topic, but it was just such a bizarre kind of notion for me, and I wanted to kind of pull from where I was coming from, which again was down south, so kind of like having, I mean, like, the book talks, the region of the South talks at one point. Sometimes like they kind of confuse themselves for one another. I mean, it was literally this thing of I need to pull from whatever kind of wealth of not experiential, but just this kind of like I just needed everyone to talk to me, and like having the novel speak within this kind of like bookend framing device, it seemed appropriate, right? Like you know, someone's writing a book for the first time. Who better to kind of tell the author what to do than the book itself?
How did your editor respond to that? If your editor was paring stuff out, was that on the chopping block, and you said no, I refuse to cut out my book speaking?
She didn't talk to me for 3 months after I mean, like I gave her the manuscript, and she was like, "I'll talk to you later," and apparently later meant like February to April, and
another long wait for you.
Yeah, and that was a hard wait.
Yeah.
But the real challenge, and to come clean, I mean, I feel like when she finally got in touch with me, she was like, "All right, this is what we need to do. This is what has to happen. Like, got to get this, got to do that, got to cut this, got to, you know, like kind of a list of like, I mean, she combed through that with the finest comb ever, you know, fine tooth comb, but left it up to me. And she said, like, this is where I believe the book is, and I think it's here, I think it's there, I think it's there. But you have a month, and I need that book that is.
She gave you a month?
Yeah.
Oh, good God.
Yeah, I'm telling like the
how big was the beard by the?
Well, the hair actually. I think I was like I had a very fine mane of blonde coiffed hair. Like I think I went bald in that month.
Working on that.
Yeah, the receding hairline happened March of.
Well, it was worth it. It was worth it. It is a wonderful book. It's a shocking book and a really touching book. It's a book about loss and how we deal with loss and grief in this wonderful, as you said, kitchen sink horror fashion that just really, really works. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it.
Thank you.
All of your work, actually. All of your work. So when is the Pumpkin Pie Show up next?
Well, we actually just closed, so I'd say probably spring '09. We'll be back. We're always doing something or other.
Well, it has been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
We have been talking to Clay Mcleod Chapman, and this has been the Brookdale Visiting Writer Series, and thank you for being on the show.